Welcome, and settle in for a story that might just send a shiver down your spine. Imagine finally finding the home of your dreams, an old house full of character, waiting for you to make it your own. Now picture yourself working late into the evening, the only sound being the soft echo of your footsteps, until something else breaks the silence. A noise, subtle at first but persistent. And then it happens again. Is it just the house settling, or is there something hidden within its walls waiting to be discovered? That's exactly what Ryan faced when he moved into his new home, unaware that his renovation project would soon turn into a mystery he never signed up for. Ryan had just bought his new house, and he spent the summer renovating it. The house was old and had been empty for years, so there was a lot of work to be done. One day, while working, Ryan suddenly heard an odd noise, and over the next few days, the noise would return several times. Ryan had no idea what was going on, and he started having many crazy theories, but only when he broke open his ceiling would he find out what had been making the noise. Ryan froze as soon as he heard the sound again. He was now sure that he hadn't been imagining it these past few days, but he had no idea who or what was making it. The only thing he knew for sure was that it was coming from somewhere inside the house. He gathered all his courage and searched the house carefully. He looked everywhere he thought someone could be hiding, but even after checking all the rooms, he found nothing. He didn't understand how this was possible. He was home alone, and the noise definitely sounded like it was coming from inside. Finally, he realized that the sound was coming from the ceiling. He took a hammer and started breaking it open, not knowing what to expect, but when he finally took a look inside, he was completely shocked. What had been making those noises, and who or what did Ryan find in his ceiling? Ryan was having a little break and enjoying the sun in his beautiful new garden. He had been working in the house all day, and he needed to get some rest. At this point, he was still extremely happy with his new home, and he had no idea of the chaos that was waiting for him. He had just moved into his new home and still had a lot of work to do before it was completely finished. He hadn't been looking to move, but when he saw the real estate ad for this house, he immediately knew that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Soon, he would find out that this house would bring him more surprises than he ever expected. The house was huge. It had a beautiful, spacious garden and a large terrace. The location was perfect as well. It was situated in a rural suburban area near a forest and a lake. Ryan could immediately picture himself living here until he grew old. It was the kind of house he had always dreamed of, and luckily for him, the price was incredibly low. You see, this house was quite old, and it had been empty for years. It needed a lot of work before anyone could live in it again. But to Ryan, this was not an issue at all. If anything, he even liked the idea of renovating it. This way, he could make everything exactly as he wanted. So he had bought the house and had been working on it for a while already. Things were progressing, albeit very slowly. Ryan liked to do everything by himself, so it took a little longer to get things done, but he didn't mind this at all. As Ryan finished his break and went back to work, he thought about the next steps. He had just finished painting the walls and the ceiling in the small bedroom on the first floor, and he decided to continue with the larger one. Just as he was moving all of his equipment into the other room, he thought he heard something. He froze for a moment and listened carefully, but the noise had already stopped. He thought he had probably just imagined it and went back to work. It was a beautiful day, and he really enjoyed working on his new home, but it wasn't long before he was interrupted again. He had heard something again, and to his surprise, it was the same stomping noise he had heard earlier that day. He was now sure that he was definitely not imagining things. The noises were real, but he just couldn't figure out where they were coming from. He lived alone, so it couldn't be anybody inside the house. Ryan assumed that it must be coming from outside, but the noise was only there for a couple of seconds before it stopped again. He did not have enough time to determine where it was coming from or even what it was. He decided to just let it go. It was probably some bird or other animal. He continued working, and he heard no weird noises for the rest of the day. He was convinced that it had been nothing, and was still unaware of the shocking events that would soon follow. The next day, Ryan woke up early. He went to a hardware store to buy some more tools and supplies that he needed. As soon as he got home, he put them to use. Hours passed, and he was focused on his work, lost in his thoughts, dreaming about what the house would look like once he was finally done with it. Everything went perfectly well, and Ryan was very satisfied with the progress he had made that day. He was getting tired and decided that he would get some rest soon when suddenly something happened. Ryan couldn't believe it. Was he maybe going crazy after all? He heard the exact same noise again as he had yesterday. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere above him. He ran outside to take a look at the roof, but there was nobody there. He could only spot a small bird, and it was impossible that such a small animal had made that noise. As he went back inside the house, the noise was still there, on and off again. Sometimes it stopped, but then after a couple of seconds of silence, it returned. As Ryan listened carefully, he heard something else as well, a softer noise, not as loud as the stomping. This could not be real. Was he dreaming? It was definitely a nightmare. Ryan strained his ears and did his best to focus on the other noise that could be heard underneath the stomping. After a while, his eyes widened with disbelief, and he turned pale. It sounded like someone was crying. This couldn't be happening. He was alone in this house, or was he? Ryan had to admit he was a bit frightened, but he gathered all his courage and explored every room of the house carefully. He made his way from room to room, checking every space thoroughly. He opened each closet, looked under each bed, and checked behind every door, but he found nothing. He couldn't understand what was happening. The noise had stopped by now, but it had appeared to be coming from inside the house. Ryan had looked everywhere, but he still had not found anything that could have made those noises. His mind was racing with scary thoughts. He never believed in ghosts, but the thought had definitely crossed his mind a couple of times by now. What if this was the reason that nobody had wanted to buy this house for so long? What if this was why it had been so cheap? Ryan started to think he had made a grave mistake moving here. He decided that he needed to clear his mind and went for a walk. Once he arrived back at the house, the noises were completely gone. He felt like he had woken up from a bad dream. What had he been thinking? Of course, ghosts didn't exist. There must be some logical explanation for all of this. Ryan took a hammer and started breaking a hole into the concrete, curious and frightened to see what he would find behind it. The ceiling crumbled apart, the hole getting bigger and bigger, and Ryan heard a voice saying, "We are finally free." It was little kids from the neighborhood. They had used the house as a playground for years, and they were not happy that someone had bought it. They knew there was a hole in the roof, and they wanted to pull a prank on Ryan to scare him. In the end, they all had a great laugh about it, and they even befriended Ryan. He told them they were always welcome to play in his yard, and they never scared him anymore.